but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. So we're going to be discussing a zone change application at 142 Rosemount Drive called Strawberry Park, Inc. And Mr. Brian Bateman will provide a 5-minute presentation to start us off, and then he'll later be able to respond to questions regarding the report. So, Mr. Bateman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members, and citizens. We are here this evening to discuss a zoning bylaw amendment that would allow for the development of 76 townhouse units on a parcel of land addressed as 142 Rosemount Drive. Just bear with me because my PowerPoint is not moving ahead. Am I doing this right? There you go. Thank you. And it's the area highlighted in red on the plan there. So staff is recommending approval of a zoning bylaw amendment in addition to the sale of a walkway block. And if you looked at the picture, you'll see the walkway block. I've pointed it out where it's located. To the developer is he wants to use those lands for a servicing corridor walkway. Bit of background. The subject property is known as the former Notre Dame school site. It was closed by the Waterloo Region Separate School Board in 2010 and put up for sale. It's been sitting vacant since that time, and it's been awaiting redevelopment. And over the years, staff has seen a lot of interest in this land. It's prime land in an established neighborhood from various developers wanting to develop the land, including one which was a 10-story apartment building. Luckily, it didn't go through, that sale. The land was acquired by Strawberry Park in 2016. An application to amend the bylaw was filed in late 2016. Public consultation commenced. A NIM, a neighborhood information meeting, was held in early 2017. And then the file was subsequently appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board in late 2017, as referenced in my report. Recently, the landowner has withdrawn his appeal, so the application, along with the potential land sale, could be brought to committee and allow Kitchener Council to decide the outcome. So just a bit of context. So the site is situated in a mature, stable neighborhood located close to the intersection of Rosemount Drive and River Road East. It's a large, irregular parcel of land, almost 2 hectares in area, with frontage onto Rosemount Drive. Surrounding development is characterized as low-rise residential, and I've kind of highlighted various colors on my plan to show the various forms of existing housing. Orange being singles, blue being the semi-detached, yellow the multiples, and green townhouses. So this slide here is to depict the application or the plan that was submitted with the original application, and I'll highlight very quickly what they were asking for at that time. So they were asking for 92 units in total. They were proposing 3-story quads in one of the sections of housing. There were larger blocks of townhouse units. Setbacks were limited, in my opinion. The floor space ratio was a 0.71. Building height was 2 and 3 stories. And of course, they were proposing a park, which we had asked for. And then through the public engagement process, through the comments I received and the NIM that was held in 2017, and just ongoing dialogue between staff, there were changes made. And I think if you look at this plan, the general layout is the same, but there are a number of significant changes that I will highlight to the committee because I think it's important. So these include, the major thing is a 17% reduction in units. It's down to 76 from 92. The 3-story quads were eliminated. It's a form of housing that really isn't found in this neighborhood. We've increased the setbacks. I think that's important for compatibility, particularly to the neighbors that back onto or front onto River Road and Camden Place. And improved separation as a result of those increased setbacks. Smaller blocks of townhomes. Again, if you look at the units that back onto the River Road property, you'll see 3 blocks of townhouse units. There were 2 blocks of 8, so that helps to increase gaps between the buildings, and it reduces the overall massing. As I've noted, the next one, floor space ratio has decreased to 0.63. Fencing and trees are proposed around the perimeter for privacy. And of course, the parkland will still remain. And of course, all of this is referenced in my zoning bylaw. If you've taken a look, I've taken particular measure to really fix a lot of this development so that if it gets sold, which I don't think it will, or there's changes, they'll have to come back to either the Committee of Adjustment and there'll be a further public process. So I think I've taken adequate measures to ensure that this plan is the plan that will be put in place. Here's a conceptual rendering. I won't get into this too much because I think Mr. Aston in his presentation has color ones that look much better, but it's just to show generally that they're going for brick, stone, and vinyl siding. It'll aesthetically look quite nice, and I think staff will ensure that it fits in with the neighborhood. And then the disposition of the city walkway block. So this is a piece of land that is owned by the city. The developers asked to acquire these lands for the city. The reason being is they need it to service their lands. This is sort of like the lowest point of the property where they can have their sanitary and their storm sewer directed out this walkway block to services located on River Road. Our engineering staff agree with this approach. It's the most practical, logical, and cost-effective solution for this development, and hence why we're recommending sale. And of course, it also, we want them to assume the liability if it's their lands of the servicing and maintenance. And more importantly, it will be a joint servicing corridor walkway, so the way it's there now, it's a walkway into these lands, it will remain a walkway. You'll just be under private ownership. So just quickly in the highlights and conclusions, this conforms to provincial, regional, and city policy. Contextually, staff's opinion that townhouses are a positive addition to the area. It creates housing variety and choice in an established neighborhood, which is an important policy initiative in our official plan. It, in my opinion, represents balanced intensification. It's been designed to be sensitive to and compatible with neighboring homes. We've had a public consultation process. We've listened to the residents, and we've incorporated some of those changes within the plan. A new neighborhood park will be created. There isn't one there now. It's important to have one. And then to facilitate the servicing, we're recommending that the disposition of the lands used for walkway is required. Thank you. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to hold questions till after the delegates. All right. So first up, we have Dave Aston from MHBC Planning. Oh, the clicker. All right. Welcome. You have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Marsh, and members of committee. And I want to thank Brian and others in city staff, Ms. Ross, and others who aren't here, who were part of the discussions to get us to this point this evening. We started down a road. There was an appeal. We worked with staff very hard in addressing comments and concerns, and then concluded that it's best to come back here and actually have committee and council provide direction rather than working through the OMB process. So we're here tonight and very thankful for the approach and willingness of staff to work with us. I don't intend to repeat what Mr. Bateman has covered off. He covered off pretty much everything that I was going to speak to as far as the key issues associated with changes to the plan. I will just pick up on a couple things as I work through my presentation. Mr. Bateman covered the chronology, and that's where we are. We originally started the process in February 2015 with a proposal of 136 units, so it had more stacked townhouses and quads. So we've moved from 136 to what is before you this evening of 76 units. The proposed zoning, the park is proposed to be zoned P1, so it will remain as that. That park's proposed to be dedicated or conveyed to the city as parkland, and the balance of the lands R6. Right now the lands are zoned institutional, and the lands are designated low-rise residential in your new official plan. What Mr. Bateman had concluded, and we agree with, is the proposed zoning conforms with the official plan. In fact, it would suggest that the existing zoning doesn't conform to your official plan, so what's being proposed brings the lands into conformity with your official plan as far as a vision for the land use designation. Mr. Bateman covered off the various changes. He did a great job at that, and covered really the majority of the changes from density to height and massing and setbacks. We've done work on tree management and also did work on traffic. City staff had indicated a traffic study wasn't required as part of the original submission. As follow-up to some of the neighborhood comments, we had Paradigm do some traffic counts and obtain some information that we circulated to the city, and then that was reviewed, and that was supported by city staff as far as no improvements being required. This is the final site plan, and then this gives you some idea of what we're proposing for form. So the brighter green or blue, however it shows on your screen, is the two-story townhouses, and at 9.4 meters. What's permitted is 11 meters. So again, as Mr. Bateman suggested, we're building in the proposed zoning very specific details to ensure the form of housing. And internally are the back-to-back, and those are requested at 11 meters, given that they're internal to the site and would be screened by the two-story homes. This gives you an indication of the proposed designs. Again, something we'll work through with city staff as part of the site plan process. The supporting studies that were concluded, these were a requirement as part of the application and through the pre-consultation process. There's been a lot of study done for the lands, and these have been supported by staff, and there are no agency concerns. And in conclusion, we support the staff recommendation, support the zoning bylaw that's proposed, have been in discussions with regard to the servicing corridor, and will continue with that process with city staff as the requirements to implement should council support the staff recommendation this evening as far as the sale of those lands. So we believe that we're in conformity with the required provincial policies, consistent with the provincial statements, and conformity with the official plan. And we're here this evening asking for your support of the staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. So we have some questions for you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in, Mr. Ashton, and making this presentation. I know it's been a long road. If it's any consolation, it's been much longer for me because it predates your current owner. Just a couple quick things. We've obviously discussed this somewhat to death over the years, but just to clarify for the residents that are here, do you have an idea of the average square footage of these units that are going to be going in?
There'll be 1,000 to 1,500 square feet.
Okay, good. And do you know offhand, can you put for those that are worried about the impact of valuation, can you give me an idea of what you think the average selling price for these might be in a range?
I don't know what the average selling price will be at this point, the range. we can follow up with that,
Oh, okay,
but
no,
I'm not sure.
Thought you might have that offhand. So as you're aware, there's been negotiations going on forever, and I just wanted to ask you the last part that's actually not part of this that we spoke about is I understand that the developer will also, typically when we asked for dedication of parkland, which isn't always the case, the city just gets the land and then we have to grade it and we have to do the design. My understanding is the applicant will design the park and they will install it as well, and as long as the city covers the actual capital costs of the equipment. You're committed to that, your client's committed to that?
Yeah, through you, Chair Marsh, it's a bit unique. The conveyance of the land will occur through the site plan process, and that's kind of over the 5% dedication, but it's what's shown there. And then what we've discussed is that we would work with city staff as part of the site plan process and the landscape plan design on coming up with a design for the park. We would then work to the installation element of the park will be, installing the emergency access and the access into the site in any event. So we thought it would make sense to work on the installation subject to the city paying for whatever I'll call infrastructure, swing sets, monkey bars, whatever it may be, that are determined to be included within the park.
Okay, that could see the park get built much quicker. So you wouldn't have any concerns then if I were to tie that additional element to a recommendation for the approval?
No, we would have no concerns with that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Just about the park. How big is this park? Is it a park or is it a parkette? And what amenities would actually fit in it?
The park is, it's about 1,200 square meters. What could fit in the park? We've done an initial look at the size of the park. You can fit kind of a walkway through there. There's enough room to have a seating area. There is enough room to have, some kind of a play structure for small children. So it's sized to the point where it could be kind of both a passive and a functional park space.
Okay. My other question is regarding the trees. So I think somewhere here I read that the trees will be removed or will be assessed. Your pictures have lots of trees. So do you have any idea of how many trees will be removed and how many will be planted or replaced?
As part of the submission, we did do a tree management plan. The trees that are in green, which are really the boundary trees, are trees that will be retained. There's trees internal to the site that would be removed. And then there's trees that are in this area. I'm trying to point to where the park is, but in any event, where we believe we can save those as well. If you drive along Rosemount, you can see the existing trees. We think we can save those as well. And then as far as additional trees, there'll be plantings in the park and kind of additional screen along the rear of the proposed townhouses to the park. There will be boundary trees planted around the boundary of the lands in accordance with the city's requirements for tree plantings. So there will be some removals internal and then additional plantings on the site.
Okay, and finally, where it says tree number 52, just below that, is that a property? Is that a house right now, or it's?
Sorry, I can't see as well on this screen.
Oh. Okay, so it's the first house along Rosemount Drive. If you look at this map, it looks like the first house after what would be the park, if you're heading north or to the top of the page. Is that house is that being removed?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, there's no buildings being removed. That's the newer building, the newer semi-detached that's up there now. And so those trees will be retained and that building will be maintained.
No, I'm actually talking about the last building. So if you look at the houses that are along Rosemount, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. If you start up at the, I don't know this street, the River Road end, and come down Rosemount, in this diagram it shows 4 houses, and here you're showing 3.
Well, if I may, Madam Chair, the one house shown here, it fronts onto River Road, and I think that's what we've just kind of cut off the corner where it's kind of on the corner of River and Rosemount.
No, I'm not talking there.
I think we're talking about where it says tree number 1 and tree number 2.
Well, it's just below tree number 52 is what I'm looking at.
Yeah. So perhaps we can put, it's on the screen. You can't see can you see the screen? So just below tree 52, there's a grayed out portion with this, yeah.
And here it's weird too.
It'd be lot 4. No, the one below that.
Below that.
So, through you, Madam Chair, I apologize. So the aerial photo is showing the new semi-detached home that's been built recently. The tree management plan is kind of graying in the lot where that home has been constructed.
Okay.
Okay, so that's remaining, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There aren't any further questions for you, Mr. Aston.
Thank you. Happy to come back if any questions arise.
Sure. Okay, thanks. Okay, next up we have Amelia Skykemp. Hello.
Hello, Council. Thank you for having me here and this opportunity to voice my opinions on the proposed zoning and development.
You're welcome.
I have some expressed concerns, and I'm going to go through, I think, the first portion of just in interest of time, my quick bullets, and then kind of elaborate on those points further. One is understood that there was a public consultation, but this public consultation was over 2 years ago. Now, so since that time and the last meeting of February 23rd, 2017, there hasn't been any public consultation since that point. For instance, I'm a new resident to the area. I've had no say in any of this until this point. I basically read the report and just through knowing such things, kind of picked out some points to discuss. So that leads into my first point that I think, considering the significant changes to the original plan that I don't feel that there is sufficient public engagement that has happened in terms of that. I don't think there has been representation to come forward and comment on those changes appropriately as per before in the original plan. I don't believe that I read the first residents' concerns. I don't believe that a lot of those questions were adequately answered. Also, when we're talking about this R6 designation, now I keep going to, it's becoming more in line with the surrounding area. So the surrounding area is designated R3, right? So single dwelling, and semis, right? And if it would stay in I designation, yes, it's a school, something like that, and allow for a singular semi, right? And R6 designation allows for multi-res. I don't see how that is in line with the area, which is, I would say, just based on my quick assessment is at least 95% zoned R3. So I don't understand how we as the public are held to a more stringent zoning than the proposed development. I'm a little concerned about environmental studies. I mean, so I understand there's been a tree study. Just wondering if there was an entertainment of an environmental impact study or environmental impact assessment. It was noted that there are features on the site or lack of features that involve GRCA involvement. Was the GRCA consulted on those? I usually would go to the GRCA and present that, and they would tell you that there aren't. Just these are questions as I've been involved before. And also this comes up very often: depreciation and property value. There are actually mechanisms to kind of look into this, and the report basically just says flux in market value, and you can't really assess it. But you can do studies of financial impacts in similar areas and similar places, right? That's one mechanism. For instance, I've also had a recent appraisal on my home. I can easily bring back that appraiser with a plan of the proposed development and see what they think it would be worth post that. Now, would that be considered in the future development? So in general, I mean, these kind of group together, but they speak of compatibility. I don't agree with the compatibility statement. I don't think it does fit the neighborhood. I'm not opposed, definitely, to residential infrastructure development, but I think that it should stay in line with the R3 designation, the same as it currently is. So it don't look like I have 12 seconds. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your comments. I was just wondering, so I heard your concerns, but one of them, you said that you don't think that the questions were adequately addressed that were mentioned in the report.
Yes.
Specifically, which ones?
A lot of it was surrounded around that designation, that R3 designation,
okay.
And a lot of it was that the residents who had formally put forward the comments were saying, we're in favor of keeping the I1 designation or moving to an R3 designation, but all of a sudden R6 came up. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that was addressed. I understand that it's it's a move towards a low rise. However, I know that any of these structures, including my home, that were built in the 50s are going to be dwarfed by a two-story development regardless. Mm-hmm. And so, are there line of sight studies done on things like that to establish these setbacks? I moved from Toronto looking at another condo building right across from me. I moved back to Kitchener to not. And so that's a concern of mine. Mm-hmm. Obviously, okay. I think that's a concern of multiple residents based on the previous round of comments. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your thoughts. There don't appear to be any other questions for you right now. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Next, we have Terry Dietrich. Hi there.
Hi, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have any notes, and my question is really very simple. And it concerns Phase 1, which is the first part of the development. I'm not sure if anybody in the city is aware of a problem that had developed when it was built. There was a very serious accident that took place. It was in the backyard, so most people weren't aware of it. And what I can tell you is that my wife has pictures if you want to see what happened. The subcontractor was lifting trusses onto the top. These buildings are 10 meters, so it's quite a tall boom truck that they used. I can tell you, we lived 4 houses down when the ground shook. That boom truck went like that. And it was in our backyard, the backyard's there, for I don't know how many hours, because they had to go and get a boom to pick it up. By the grace of God, nobody was hurt on this site, and no neighbor property was damaged, because this part that they were lifting went like that. So the boom is in our backyards for hours. It's full of hydraulics, it's full of gas, and it's full of oil. So we talked to the crew, and we asked if we could help them with either calling the fire department, the ministry, or the Ministry of Labor. Their answer was, nobody was hurt here. We don't have to call any of the ministries, and we will clean up. So I want to know if the city or anybody's been advised if there's been an environmental cleanup at all, because that boom was upside down. And if you'd like to see pictures, my wife has it on the phone. Okay? Like I say, it leaked for hours. All right.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll be asking that of staff. There are no other delegations, so we can now queue in for questions of staff. Oh, well, we do have members in the gallery. Before I guess we continue, the mayor has asked if anybody else is wanting to say a few words. Okay. My apologies. I thought that the clerk had spoken to everybody who was in the meeting.
I definitely did not think I was going to ask the question here, so please give me patience on this. I'm actually, if you don't mind looking at the map, I'm the resident of Lot 45, which is 325 Sherwood. And this actually has been a question since we bought our house in August about exactly what is going to go on back there. But if you can see, the road gets actually incredibly close to our property line, and we have 3 trees that are on that property line and 4 trees on the other side of our property line. And we're actually very concerned about whether we dig up that road, are we going to be killing our trees, and what's going to be happening to the trees on that property line. And of course the property line, I'm not sure what the law is about that, but my biggest concern is the ones in our property. If we're going to be building this road, if we dig down deep and accidentally kill the roots, will these now be our responsibility in the sense that we have to take down these trees now? That's my question.
Okay, that's a good question. So that would be a question of staff. Start with that.
Madam Chair, the city has a tree management policy, and we look at the impact of the development on those trees. So they'll have an arborist to do a report, and we'll look at, and they'll come up with ways of how they can. There's various methods that can be done. There's root pruning and other things, but the main thing is not to impact those trees. And certainly, I know we've been working with MHBC to come up with a plan to try and retain those trees as much as possible. I would suggest perhaps that Mr. Aston could also speak further about this as well. But that, I would say right now, the preliminary plan is to retain those trees. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I guess the follow-up question then is, if the trees do end up being damaged or having to come down, is part of the tree management plan for the developer to have to replace the trees?
Correct.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect.
All right. Any others?
Just a quick question in regards to the houses that are on River Road. There's a substantial drainage ditch that runs pretty much on every house on River Road, and it kind of comes into Camden Place. And where you present your walkway, that's where the sewers are, or that's where it drains into. And I'm just curious to know what's going to happen with that ditch. It is there for a reason. I'm curious to know what the planning is around that ditch or drainage culvert.
Okay. Okay, that's a good question. Mr. Bateman?
Yeah, absolutely, Madam Chair, through you. The plan is really to put infrastructure to collect that water through that ditch, because that's the lowest point of the site, and it will carry that water through a pipe, through a storm pipe, through to the walkway, and then out to River Road. So it won't be changing the ditch, if that's what you're asking. That will stay.
So will that ditch be covered in and a sewer will be in there, like a tube will be running with that level with the houses that back onto River Road?
I don't know, Mr. Aston, are you able to confirm that, whether or not they're going to fill that ditch in or not? I mean, that would require a retaining wall along the back of those properties too then, right? So.
And that's actually my next question, is those retaining walls will need to be redone.
Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, if that's the plan, it won't hold.
Mr. Aston?
Through you, Madam Chair, the intent is to have, as Mr. Bateman suggested, kind of catch basins in the back to collect the water, to kind of manage the water there and collect it and bring it to the storm sewer. We are looking at replacing kind of the fencing and retaining wall that's there along the back of some of those properties where there's a grade differential, and at some point we'll have to have a discussion with those property owners, and I know this property owner, I spoke with her this morning and offered to kind of go out there and meet on site and walk through what's being proposed. So that's something that will occur, and the details will come out through the required engineering plans as part of the site plan process, and we'll be sure to work with staff and, where needed, speak with the adjacent property owners as well.
Okay, thank you. So those who've come up to speak, please share your information with the clerk. Any others? Well, right now, no, it's not a back and forth, really. Yeah. Okay, so next we're going to have questions of staff. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Actually, the delegates asked a couple of questions that I was planning on covering, so that's good. The first one was, again, respect to that drainage. I've heard from staff that there's been some issues with the water volumes and some concern that about the amount of water that sometimes builds up there. I've been assured that the drainage will be better once this development occurs instead of worse. Can staff comment on that?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I can confirm that. We have very stringent stormwater management policies in the city.
Very good. So I mentioned earlier when I was speaking to the representative for the developer that we had worked out an additional agreement in terms of the doing the design for the park playground and the installation, but obviously not the capital cost. Is that something, I know it's sort of a late stage add, but is that something that we can add to the motion? This doesn't necessarily need to be in detail now, because we can obviously discuss it at council meeting, but is that something that we can add to the motion notionally now? And how would I do that?
So through you, Madam Chair, staff would have no issues with doing that. And
okay, so without actually having to write it out, if I move the motion, then that would notionally be included, and then we can discuss it in the interim and then make sure that's captured for time for council? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, very good. And I had one other question. It eludes me. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I have a few questions then of staff. With regards to Mr. Dietrich's point about the spill that happened a few years ago in Phase 1, were staff aware of that, and do we know that the soil has been cleaned up adequately?
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly planning staff, I wasn't aware of that, so I don't know if any other of our staff, building or whatever, would be aware of that. So I don't know.
Okay.
We can follow up.
Pardon?
We can follow up. And,
yeah, between now and council, if you can follow up. and with the Dietrichs, perhaps, since they know exactly where it happened, et cetera. That would be great. I don't know if Mr. Aston has any comment on that.
Madam Chair, we're not aware of anything either, but we'll follow up on our end. Nothing was reported to Strawberry Park, so we'll check.
Yeah, okay, so we'll be looking for an answer before council. Okay, thank you. And then a few other points were brought up, Mr. Bateman, just around whether or not there was any communication with GRCA, which there typically is.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, yes, they were contacted. They're part of our regular consultation group, so if there was any issue with respect to that, we would have dealt with that through this process.
Okay, and then do you have any comment about the R6 zoning versus R3?
Yeah, well, just maybe what I can mention is that the current zoning of the property is what we call an institutional 1 and I1. It's a school site, so that was the zoning that we applied. And in that zoning category, there's also the permissions. They allow single detached and semi-detached uses as well. And that, I think the residents' comments that there was a preference initially for those types of uses rather than townhomes. I get it. Our policy direction, as you're well aware, and we've mentioned this many, many times, the low-rise designation does support a variety of housing in our city, and we encourage it throughout all our residential neighborhoods, and that does include multiples and townhouses of low-rise nature, which this project is. I think one of the benefits of going through this exercise with R6 zoning is that it has enabled the public to provide comments to this process. If they were to go with single detached or semi-detached, the zoning would allow heights of up to 3 stories, 10.5 meters, whereas through this process, we were able to fix heights because we've had that process to do so, which we wouldn't. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's about compatibility here, whether they're single detached semis or townhouses. This has changed to the neighborhood, and I understand they're used to backing onto a school site, not homes. And I think we've worked really hard to try and make this as compatible as possible, which I feel it is.
Okay, thank you very much. So do we have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Davey?
Yep, thank you. I'll move it, and comments as well, Madam Chair.
Yeah, comments now, yep.
Thank you. You caught the question that I had missed earlier. I just wanted to start by saying that this site was, I'm going to say, a bit of a trial by fire for a new councillor. It only goes back to 2015 for these current owners, but I was... I'm going to say knee-deep in it back in 2011 when we started trying to figure out what to do with the situation. I'd never been faced with a situation like this before, where it was a school site. It was parkland that the community had gotten used to, and it was a difficult thing for me to wrap my head around the fact that it needed to be developed. And the fact of the matter is, no matter how much any of us wanted something otherwise, it was going to be developed. As Mr. Bateman pointed out, there was some sort of scary prospects along the way, including a high-rise apartment building going in there, which I think was absolutely incompatible. But I think we've come to a point now, even with the current owner, where we've actually cut the number of units in half through negotiation. Through negotiation. There's I'm not going to go through them all, but there's a whole bunch of areas on 4-3 where the proponents made concessions to try and make it better for the residents that are there, including the height. I know a lot of the houses are lower there, so we got that height down from 3 stories to 2, and even lower than that, 10.5 meters as is standard for the people that are around it. More importantly, setbacks. All of the built forms are now much further away from the existing residences than were otherwise from the initial plan. But the thing that I'm most proud of, if I'm being honest, is that from day one, the residents in the community said that they wanted parkland here. They didn't want 5% going to some pot that went potentially somewhere else in the city. They wanted a park on this site. And not only do we have a park included here, the owner of the property has committed to accelerating the development of that park so it goes in much sooner and at a lower cost to the residents of the city of Kitchener. I'm quite proud of that. I know these are a situation where, people are never going to be 100% happy, but I can say with confidence that this is the absolute best deal, especially given the provincial direction in terms of density going forward. I think this is the absolute best deal we can get for the residents nearby. So I'm pleased to move it.
Okay, thank you. There appear to be no other comments. So all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. And that concludes our meeting tonight. Thank you, everybody, and let's go Raptors go. That's next.